the first lecture in this series, I suggested that both ancient myths and modern sci-fi draw from the same sources of inspiration, that they are basically the same stories and genres, only dressed up in different surface details. In order to understand how this works, we need to look at the work of Jung. Carl Gustav Jung was a Swiss psychologist and student of Freud, and a member of the psychoanalytical school in Vienna. He became dissatisfied with Freud's limited approach. Jung became fascinated by the way certain images and symbols appear in the dreams and spontaneous fantasies of his patients. On researching these, he would discover the very same myths and symbols in ancient classical works or obscure alchemical texts. He came to the conclusion that there is a common source of myth and meaning that is universal and appears regardless of culture or historical period. He called this the collective unconscious, which he contrasted with the personal or individual unconscious described by Freud. The personalities that inhabited the collective unconscious he referred to as archetypes, and stated that these were the same as what in previous times were called gods. It is these same archetypes that appear time and again in stories and legends, in different guises but always with the same underlying structure. For Jung, these archetypes are innate universal prototypes of ideas that have a tendency to form mythological images or motifs. These archetypes occur even in the symbolism of medieval alchemists and in the fantasies of schizophrenic patients. Jung's students and followers further commented upon his ideas and also presented them in easy-to-understand terms, as Jung's works are very technical and obscure, with only one, Man and His Symbols, written for the layman. Perhaps the most important and influential figure who took up Jung's insights was the American comparative mythologist and lecturer Joseph Campbell, who I briefly referenced in the first video. Campbell studied how Freud and Jung used myth in psychology, and although he never met Jung, he was greatly influenced by him. His conception of myth was based on Jung's method of dream interpretation, which revolves around the use of symbols. His series of books, Masks of God, serves as an encyclopedic study of world mythology. He's best known, though, for his description of the hero myth, a universal series of motifs and mythic events that supposedly are found in all places and cultures, and provided the plot outline for the original Star Wars. Campbell's own work is more approachable than Jung's, and it is easy to see how George Lucas could use his idea of a common myth of a hero's journey as a basis for the original Star Wars. The same Campbellian archetypes also appear either through formulaic screenwriting or direct intuitive story-making in later blockbuster movies. Nevertheless, it's not necessary to be familiar with Campbell or Jung, like Lucas or the Wachowskis, to write an archetypal story. The whole idea of the archetypes and of a universal mythic consciousness is something that appears spontaneously. All one needs is inspiration. The tackiest novels and movies can incorporate archetypal or mythic themes even if they don't do it very well. And obviously, a genius like JRR Tolkien, the father of the modern fantasy genre, constructed languages and world building, didn't need to read his contemporaries Jung or Campbell at all, because like them he went straight to the source with his studies of old English literature. Tolkien wasn't a non-fiction writer like Jung or Campbell, but his comprehensive world-building and storytelling of Middle-earth are the exact literary equivalent. And like Jung, he asserted a universal source of myth and legend. In his 1939 essay on fairy stories, he refers to fairy as both a fictitious realm and a transcendental one, like the Jungian collective unconscious where man derives his creativity from. In his 1931 poem Mythopoesis, he explained and defended myth-making as a creative art about fundamental things. What Jung, Campbell and Tolkien are all saying is that we have an intrinsic psychological and spiritual need to believe in and experience myth and magic in our lives, that this is an intrinsic part of human nature. Moreover, there is an actual phenomenological reality that the creative imagination taps into. I refer to this as the imaginal, but it can equally be called the collective unconscious, the world of fairy, the subtle planes, the intermediate world, or whatever. It is this inner yet universal reality that is the source of meaning and adventure in a meaningless and mundane world.